it's very much a focus. It's nice to see that. That's a little broader. Yeah, we're starting to get some training programs going. So nice. I'm not going to First, with them at the back. Yeah, focus on everyone else. First one is then start first with them around the then one because yung pun dah ada pun
Okay.
Another one with online.
Okay, 4 3.
Thank you so much. Good job. Thank you. And then we dive into the question. So that I can introduce each of these people first. Yeah. And then go into the and the last one that was get this together we go to the so shall we start? Okay, so good morning everyone. So wonderful to have everyone here. We're gonna get started in open science. That's our topic this morning. And I'm so happy to have 4 amazing panelists here today. 2 ladies with me here in person and 2 gentlemen online. So here we have Professor Dr. Shella Hill-Holmes, and she has received her Bachelor in Science degree in Physics from the University of Missouri, Rolla, now known as Missouri University of Science and Technology, and her PhD degree in Engineering Physics at the University in Virginia. Her thesis was focused on quantitative measurements of perfusion with arterial spin labeling MRI. After graduation, she went on to Dr. Alan Koretsky's lab at the NIH as a postdoctoral researcher to learn functional neuroimaging. She is currently a professor in the Joint Emory Georgia Technical Biomedical Engineering Department at Atlanta, USA, and is the program director for the 9.4 Tesla MRI. Her research seeks to elucidate the neurophysiological processes that underlie the bone signal and develop analytical techniques that leverage spatial and temporal information to separate contributions from different sources. She is a senior editor at Imaging Neuroscience, formerly at NeuroImage, and she's on the editorial board of eLife, Network Neuroscience, and eNeuro. Welcome, Shella. Thank you so much, and thank you for organizing this panel. I'm really looking forward to the discussion. Thank you. Okay, and next is Elizabeth Dupre. Dr. Elizabeth Dupre is a postdoctoral fellow at Stanford University with Professor Russ Kodrak, a psychologist and computational neuroscientist by training. Her work focuses on modeling individual level brain activity across a range of cognitive states. She does so by benchmarking and extending statistical models, methods for human neuroimaging data analysis. Throughout her work, she has remained actively involved in the open source ecosystem with a focus on improving the reproducibility of analytic workflows. Welcome. Thank you. Thank you for having me. Yes, very much. Thank you. All right. And two of our online panelists are Dr. Hyung Han Lee. Dr. Lee is currently the Chief Technology Officer and co-founder of the medical AI startup Medley Incorporated in Republic of Korea. He has obtained his PhD degree in 2021 from the Department of Medical Sciences. So, my co-moderator Nabila has told me it's better to use the mic, so let's go on. Okay, so Dr. Hyung was recognized as one of the top 5 researchers whose achievement at the ISMRM 2019, where he presented his findings in the plenary session regarding MR spectroscopy, and he received the Summa Cum Laude Award. Currently at MedLid, he is dedicated to solving unmet medical needs for various neurodegenerative brain diseases using AI-based non-invasive metabolite profiling technology, leveraging magnetic resonance spectroscopy. Dr. Hyung, can you hear me?
Yes, thank you for your introduction.
Okay, so now we have our other speaker from Malaysia, who is Associate Professor Dr. Ibrahima Fai. Dr. Ibrahima is an lecturer and Associate Professor at University Technology Petronas, Malaysia. He is with the Department of Fundamental and Applied Sciences and the Center for Intelligent Signal and Imaging Research, CISIR, is a national center of excellence in Malaysia. He received his training and PhD in mathematics from the University of Toulouse and a master's in science in engineering of medical and biotechnological data from École Centrale Paris. His research interests include machine learning, mathematics, signal and image processing, and science of learning. Dr. Ibrahima, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Thank you for the introduction.
Okay.
And nice
Wonderful.
having you. Thanks.
Okay, so I'm Priya Supaya. I'm your moderator for today, and I'm happy to have all 4 with various backgrounds in neuroimaging with us today. So, can we start with Shella? How would you deconstruct and define open science?
I guess I should use the microphone. I think of it as open presentation and access to results, right? Most of my experience has come on the publishing side of that, so lowering barriers to people to be able to publish their findings and for other people to access those findings in journals. But I think open access goes a lot beyond that, right? It's being able to get the data that you need, to be able to get the code you need, not just to be able to access it, to be able to use it. And I think that's one of the places we often fall short. I know in my own lab, we try to make our code or our analysis available to everyone, but then a grad student leaves. And who's going to take over that? Who's going to make sure it still works? Who's going to deal with the bug that somebody finds 3 years later? So I think there are a lot of challenges.
Yes, very much like opening a Pandora's box. Yes. How about you, Elizabeth? How would you define open science and deconstruct it?
Similarly, I think we can think about a lot of research artifacts and whether or not we can access those research artifacts, right? So you can think about, can you access open code? Can you access open data? Can you access the final publication that comes out of it? Can you build on all of those? I've also seen an argument that really when we talk about open science, we should be talking about open scholarship, because there's so many other pieces of our research workflows and experience that are included under the broader banner of open science. So, you can think about open educational materials, for example, are often really critical for how we gain training and retrain ourselves as the field evolves. And those may or may not traditionally be counted under open science. So I think for me, thinking about things under the broader open scholarship umbrella of, we are generating research outputs as part of this broader cycle of how we conduct science, and how can we make as many of those accessible to other people, and also something other people can build on, knowing that nothing is forever from one group. And I think that brings up some interesting conversations that maybe we'll get to, but at least if it's accessible and reusable in its initial form, that's I think the ideal in many ways for the research outputs themselves.
Okay, nice to know about that. Yes, definitely all these resources are important, right? For especially these educational tools that you said. So it's definitely needed, and the students will definitely benefit from this, right? How about Dr. Ibrahima? Do you have something to share about your definition of open science and open
Right.
access?
Yeah. So I would think about two keywords actually in that case for open science in general. The first one will be inclusivity, because this one is extremely important for me in the sense that it's not reserved for a group of people. So for me, this is the first thing I would think about. And the second thing is about the transparency, in the sense that whatever you do through the whole line of your publication, or let's say your research, everything needs to be very clear so that anyone else could use the data, reproduce the same thing that you have done. So I will summarize it with these two words. That means inclusivity and then transparency.
So yes, transparency and inclusivity, right?
Inclusivity,
Yes,
that's right.
definitely important things. Okay, how about you, Hyung? Dr. Lee?
Where open science and can be understood in various ways, but I will talk it briefly from my viewpoints. As mentioned in introduction, I conduct collaborate research on neuroscience using MRS in my industry field. And compared to other neuroimaging modalities, MRS has significantly lower accessibility, and it is relatively unfamiliar to use. So for institutions that lack experience with such modality, such as MRS, or find it challenging to utilize, sharing new technologies and sharing validation data mutually as part of open access. So from my perspective, engaging with collaborative institutions allow me to share neuroscientific insights and utilize them to develop new methodologies. Thus, I think open science and open access as a mutually beneficial and virtuous cycle of research collaboration.
Okay, thank you, Hyung. And Hyung, how would you share your own experience related to replicable research methods? Your own experience in open science practices?
Yeah, but despite running a company after I founded, thankfully, I have encountered various examples of open science, and notably, I conduct a technical research training session on MRS for different institutions, and encouraging researchers from various fields to utilize MRS more effectively. And I engage in mutual validation of new technologies through our own or partner institutions' MRS data, and share the research protocols to achieve more standardized and refined experimental methods, leading to improved research outcomes. And In particular, the field of MRS often suffers from poor data quality, resulting in lower reproducibility compared to other medical imaging modalities as well. So to address this issue, I develop and share more straightforward data acquisition and analysis methods through open science activities. And by doing so, we are continuously verifying the reproducibility of disease-related neuroscientific interpretations and analytical methodologies.
Okay, thank you for your sharing. How about Ibrahima, your own experience on reproducible research and your open science practices?
Right. So in terms of reproducibility, what we have done in our lab was that we have a journal club. So this journal club, let's say every week, a student will have to present a paper in his field. And ideally, he should go into the details, present the method to his peers, and then, if possible, reproduce the work. So that was one way actually for us to realize the complexity in terms of how we should detail our work if we want someone to be able to reproduce it. But this is really a learning, not only for the students, but for the staff as well, in terms of, because then you realize that even when people don't give the details, so when you write your own paper, then you realize that you need to add more details that someone else who is not, let's say, at the point of the research, he was not involved, will be able to reproduce the work. So that was the first thing. The second thing was in terms of when we have PhD students coming in, let's say graduate students. So they come in, they do some research, they get some data, and they will leave. So the next student should be able to use the data. So somehow we train them in the sense that you need to give all the details of the data that you have obtained in your work, so that the next students should be able to use it in a proper way. So I could say these are two experiences that we have had in terms of reproducibility.
Okay, so where do you keep the data so that it can be reusable?
Yeah, so actually we had a local repository from the center where we have all the data from the PhD students, for example, any EEG or any type of data they have acquired themselves. So we store it over there.
So does it need some kind of authorization to access this data? Is it open to others to use?
Yeah, so we did not reach that level because initially it was just locally. That means for the students, when we have a new students coming in the same research, so we can just use the data and
Okay.
put working on it.
So
Yeah,
it is for those affiliated with your lab.
that's right.
All
That's
right.
right. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Ibrahima. How about you, Shella? Your experience in open science?
So as far as replicability goes, I think something Dr. Fay mentioned is absolutely key, right? And that's details, detailed methods, detailed descriptions of the data so that people know how to use the protocols and the results, even if they can't get in touch with the person who actually did it the first time. Now, that said, there are limits to how far that goes with replicability. And I work a lot with small animal fMRI. There are a few labs that do this really well. And we've realized none of us do it exactly the same way. And so there's someone in the community, Johannes Grangen, who has been trying to do these multi-center studies to look at comparability across sites. And it is surprisingly bad. And I've heard the same thing for human fMRI. I think it's because we all have our own slightly different methods. And so if we try to use the exact same protocol, but we haven't been trained on the subtle details that you don't write down that go with that protocol, the results are highly variable. So I don't know how we capture this level of detail that we need. Maybe we need to make training videos or something, right? But such different things as how quickly you can get the animal in the scanner after they're initially anesthetized, how closely aligned the head is to perfectly straight in the center of the scanner. So these little things that we have tricks on, but nobody writes that in the methods, right? You don't go, oh, I realigned the mouse head 15 times until I got it perfectly centered. So I think there are aspects of that we somehow need to find a better way to address if we're going to make things a little bit more replicable across sites.
Oh, but yes, you could share it.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a couple of really interesting threads that have been brought up so far. I think one is the idea of replicating, Dr. Fay, you brought up replicating work by other members within a lab. I think that that's something, so I've seen Ted Satterthwaite had an article in the Transmitter where I think he called it reproducibility buddies after scuba diving buddies. Basically, the idea was that, you would have everything you needed to reproduce your result, and someone else from the lab would come in. And this works really well for computational methods where you have code. And so someone else would come to the code and say, can I reconstruct their whole, result section and everything else without speaking to them and see, what goes wrong. And if anything goes wrong, then you can address that before it goes to publication within the lab. And so I think that for computational methods, this question of being able to access the code directly and work with it is something that's hugely important, both within and I think increasingly for me, what's been really important is having it outside of labs. So I know that publishing initiatives have been huge on this, requiring data and code availability statements. It wasn't that long ago, although I feel old saying this, it wasn't that long ago where I remember I would read a paper and I'd be like, okay, I think I know what they did, but I have no idea. I'm just going to code it up and hope it works. Whereas now there's a much, much higher chance that I read a paper, there's a link to the code, I can go play with that code. Maybe it doesn't work for me right away, but I immediately have a much better understanding of what they were trying to do, and it puts me in a much better position to be able to actually build on what they've done than when I was sort of fumbling in the dark. And I think to this point about the non-computational things, the real hardware and actual experimental acquisitions, I absolutely agree that there too, computational methods are privileged in some ways in that we can very well describe a lot of things. A lot of things we forget to describe, like the effect that hardware actually has sometimes, but we can very well describe some things in a way that we can't always with the experimental methods. And so I think there too, a lot of these initiatives around better describing our metadata for our acquisitions, that's advanced hugely. I know Russ is in the room. BIDS has been a big part of that as well for the fMRI side. So thinking very seriously about the metadata that we use to describe our experiments is something that I've also seen move very, very quickly over the past few years, and I hope we'll continue to, because there's a lot of areas where we still need it. But in my experience so far, those pieces have certainly made a difference just in my ability to build on other people's work, which I think has really advanced the kind of work I can do.
I agree with both of you have actually brought up some important things like, like grappling in the dark. And previously people had to like guess at things. And now with a lot of technological advancement, you can actually really try to reproduce it in a more organized manner, right? So bringing me to the question, like Shella, because you're involved in publishing, of course, this main forum is not about talking about publishing, but I'm really curious, like, we have progressed a lot in code, in getting things out in open access, but publication itself has not really advanced that much. It's all in paper, right? Manuscript writing and all that. Do you think there's a potential for people to get their H index up with video, like uploading a video on their steps, like the protocol, like you said, adjusting the head of the mouse to make sure it's all well aligned? What do you think about the evolution of publication into videos?
So absolutely. And some of those mechanisms are already in place. I don't know how many people are familiar with the Journal of Visualized Experiments. So for experimental work, that's actually very nice. We've made a couple of demonstration videos about how we do simultaneous microelectrode recording and MRI. Are they, high impact, the kind of thing that the tenure committee is going to look at and say, oh, this brought up your H index? Maybe not, but that's a whole nother conversation. And don't get me started on how we ought to be evaluating people. But I like to write in there, this has been viewed over 25,000 times. That's some kind of statement that it's useful, right? And so I think, putting that kind of documentation on our efforts to help people, do their experiments well is one way to kind of move that forward. As for the future of publishing, just to jump off a bridge here, we don't really need journals, right? I mean, we need some way to make our protocols and our results accessible to everyone. We need some kind of quality control. So I don't think that peer review is ever going to go away. Nobody can review our work like our colleagues. And we need some sort of curation. But I don't think we have to consider ourselves limited to those print volumes that we used to get. So I think there are a lot of options coming up. I think, AI, I know, is changing everything, but this is something I think that it has, the potential to help us curate this data, these protocols, because the other problem that comes up with open, publishing of everything is how do you find the stuff that's relevant to you, right? We can't keep up as it is. So maybe that's a way that we can kind of learn individualized portfolios, the videos and papers and results that would help us all kind of stay up to date in our favorite area.
That's good insight into the evolving. Yes, Elizabeth.
Sorry. Yes. I just wanted to say, so I know I didn't list in the introduction, but I'm actually a editor of the Journal of Open Source Software, which I think to this point about how we make publications that aren't just paper, one of the things that I really love about JOS is that it's designed to be a developer-friendly journal. And the idea effectively is that there, for people working in computational science, you're already writing code. And currently, the incentive structure is such that having a paper is what's rewarded, not having a doc site, for example. But it makes it a very simple paper where really the main product of the paper is rich linking to all of the code that you generate. The review all takes place on GitHub. You can see all the changes that are made as part of the review. So it's a very transparent process. But I think more critically, like the research object that's being reviewed is very easily linked. It's a core part of the publication rather than something that you have to go through like 3 supplementals to find. And so I think this idea of centering, whatever our research product is, centering it in the publication more directly, making it easier to access, easier for people to really interact with, is something that has started to happen more, and I would like to see even more of.
I like that. Yeah.
I want to let you
Visual people.
I want to let you be able to give this back to the online people in a second, but I have to say, after what you've mentioned there, that OHBM has really been leading in this. We've got Aperture. Yeah. And Aperture is an awesome tool, and I don't think a lot of us have really realized how good that could be yet. But my lab has submitted some toolboxes there. It's a great place to put out tools and documentation that are useful to the community, give them a way to find it, and document that you've done it. Anyway, I'll let it pass.
Thank you. Okay, so Hyung, now I would like to ask you, what is your ideal form of open science? Like what form it should take? What would you recommend for best practices in open science?
Yeah. Well, it should be ideally be inclusive and transparent, as you know, that a transparent system that make scientific research accessibility to everyone, while also fostering to collaboration with industry as well. And it should prioritize the open access to publication, data, and methodology, ensuring that knowledge is shared freely and widely. This approach not only benefits academic research, but also enable industry to innovate more effectively by utilizing the latest scientific finding. Collaboration and reproducibility should be core tenets, with researchers encouraged to share their findings and data sets and tool openly. And by involving the industry partner, open science can bridge the gap between the academic research and practical applications, accelerating technological advancement and economic growth as well. And to achieve this, several best practices should be adopted. Researchers should publish in open access journal and repositories to make their work freely available and share their data and code in publicly accessible database. And collaboration with industry should be fostered through the joint projects, co-authorship, or open innovation platforms. And pre-registering pre-registering studies and using standardized format and open source software can enhance reproducibility and interoperability. And lastly, creating the framework for intellectual property that encouraging open licensing and collaboration while protecting commercial interests is crucial as well. And this practice collectively help to create a more transparent, inclusive, and efficient scientific ecosystem that benefits both academia and industry field.
Hyung, you are from industry, so you have a
Yeah, right.
startup. How do you balance? Like, I'm sure there are certain things that you cannot straight away make it transparent, and you work closely with academicians as well. So, how do
Mhm.
you balance this?
Actually, it is where most thing is the truth for science and for the science knowledge for the new paradigm for the explaining more such as neuroscientific um, 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 neuroscientific knowledge or technical things is as well. But yeah, it is very balanced. As you know, that it is a very balanced game for the credential and open science as well. But yeah, I think it's most important thing is the trust each other for the researcher for the more better result, more giving the more better results for the both industry and yeah um, academic field. Yeah.
Uh, okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Um, Ibrahima, how about you? Your own take on best practices in open science?
Right. So probably the first thing I would say, which I feel it's somehow lacking, it's about training and training for to researchers. Like let's say those who just start doing their research. I feel overall we are lacking in terms of training. And not even before the training, the idea of sharing your data, sharing your research, because one of the first things that we face sometimes is that what is it for me to do that from the student's point of view? Okay, what is my gain if I want to share everything that I have done? So that means first we have to look at in terms of convincing the students about the the, the need of doing this, the open science in general, and then the second is how to do it. That means the training need to be there. That would be the first aspect for in terms of best practice. The second is this is for everyone in terms of let's say again related to the previous point, what is the gain or how to motivate people to go ahead for this? So, for example, if I know some of my colleagues will not be happy with this idea, but let's say the rewards, you have a reward system. So, if you want to get, for example, funding, you need to make sure that your research will be aligned with open science. You want to get promoted, your research need to be related to open science. So, these are a bit stringent, if I could say, but probably needed to somehow push more people to go through open science. That is how I could summarize it.
Do you have experience working with people who are not in favor of open science?
Oh yes, yes, yes. I have a few colleagues. They don't really see the point because unless it is done by everyone, then they will be convinced that they should do it. Otherwise, it's just like I'm sharing my part, and maybe some other people are not doing. So what I'm gaining in it. So this mindset probably we have some work to do on it, so that people will move on. Otherwise, it will be a bit challenging, I guess.
which brings me to my next question, like how do you think open science can help early career researcher, in their own career development?
So
Right.
yeah,
Yes.
in terms of probably the first thing would be in terms of visibility.
Mm.
So that means if you go to this trend of open science, you'll be visible in terms your research will be accessible. People will know what you are doing. So that will be one aspect of it. The second is the credibility, because if I publish and I show all the details of my publication, and this should be to the whole line in terms from the beginning in terms of, let's say, design of my experiment. Everything needs to be taught in that aspect of open science. So that will give credibility to my work, and that will be definitely be beneficial in the long run in terms of my career.
Yes, thank you for sharing that. How about you, Hyung? Do you think this open science approach is something that will be important for the early career researcher? And from a career building experience, what would you say?
Yeah, I it's really important thing, and I think it's first the open science to publication and database allows the early career researchers to access latest research finding more effectively. Data for free for the more generative methodology development and reducing the research costs for such as the time consuming or something like that, and enhancing the quality of their work. And this enables early career researchers to keep up with the current research trend and easily obtain the materials needed for their studies without the uh, financial or health problem burden, such like that, even in the industry field as well. And yeah, it also promote collaboration and networking between the early career and the um, first generative of their old researchers, some things. And by sharing the data and making research finding available on open platforms, such as open platforms, and researchers have the increased opportunity to collaborate with very wide others and worldwide, I think. Yeah.
Mm. Yes, agreed. Um, so, Sheila, because we are talking about like how career building perspective, from the career building perspective, how open science practices can influence early career researcher, right? And maybe because me and Nabila, we are part of the open science special interest group, so it's so ingrained in us to actually practice open science. Can you also contrast with those who do not actually practice open science, how these two careers would be like contrasting those who do not practice open science, and how open science can actually enhance their career development?
So, what I've usually heard from people who are skeptical of open science is that they're a little bit afraid, right? A lot of times they're experimentalists. They put years into the collection of a data set. They want to publish it and get some nice high impact papers, and they think, that's what's going to help them on with their career. They're afraid if they share it too soon, somebody's going to take that data, do some cool analysis faster than they can do it themselves, and basically scoop them. And I understand that. I mean, this is something they put a lot of time and effort into. So I can see where that perspective comes from, this idea that I have to keep this to myself until I can use it to build my own profile. And I think, it's not an easy decision about when do you make data public, right? We all want to share data, but when do you share it? Do you share it as you're collecting it? Do you share everything? I'm not sure that's a good idea. I've collected a whole lot of really bad data that I don't want anybody to look at and do something with, right? We find out later that, there's something wrong with the scanner that day or something. So there's a balance to be had. And I think, especially for the early career researchers, it's important to find where that balance is. I don't think I need to highlight the good side of this, being able to establish these collaborations, which in my view are probably more beneficial to careers long term than, you know, that single high impact paper you get by making sure nobody else can publish this before you do. But the other thing I wanted to say about open science is that from the perspective of someone who's just getting started, you know, you can look at the person, a junior researcher who's sharing their data. There are also a lot of junior researchers who are getting started by using other people's data. And so the net benefit is this huge gain. And so I think, you know, that's where we see it from the community side. But I think it's important to remember from the individual side, sometimes there are counterweights, you know, that make it a more difficult decision than just let's share it all.
Yeah, I mean, I think maybe as an early career researcher, I can say something that is a little more skeptical in some ways. So I should first avow that I'm like obviously very much in open science. I think that, you know, all of these steps are really something that benefits everything we do. The thing I want to point out is this question of how do ideals interact with career building, right? So one thing that we've touched on is open code, for example. Open code, though, can mean different things. It can mean the code that supports an individual paper. It can also mean the code that supports a whole ecosystem. So I think a really good example is NIBabble in Python, for example, which is a Python library that enables us to read many different kinds of neuroimaging file formats and load them to disk and manipulate them. And it's the kind of thing that people don't often think about when they're like, oh yes, you know, this is a core tenet of open science. But there is so much scientific code that would break tomorrow if NIBabble was pulled and no one could ever access it again. You know, so being able to work on these things, I think the ideal ecosystem has many different roles, right? It has a role for a research software maintainer. It has a role for a data curator. It has a role for techs. And it has all of these different roles that right now are not well supported in the current incentive system. And so I think if you're thinking from a career building perspective, what often happens for people who get very excited about code and data sharing is that they recognize how critical these functions are and they want to get involved. And they'll get the advice. I'll speak for myself. I've gotten the advice that, like, long term, if you would like to build a career, you cannot do this all the time. You need to make sure that the code is going in service of papers and that those papers are going to go on your CV and that's going to go into a tenure packet and blah, blah, blah. And so I think that there's an interesting dynamic at play when we think about what are the ideals of the open source ecosystem versus what is the reality that we all live in within the current incentive structure. For when we say open code, we can't just mean the code that supports our own paper. Otherwise, we're all going to have to rewrite every single time ways to load in our neuroimaging files, right? Which is, as we were talking about net benefits, it's a huge net loss if we were to move to that framework. But I think we haven't yet, as a group, in the same way that we have data and code sharing mandates from journals and funding bodies, and I think that's been hugely influential, we haven't figured out how to support everything else that's so necessary, and all the other careers that are so necessary. And so for me, as an early career researcher, that's a challenge that I'm seeing play out as people, you know, move on to other paths or decide this isn't what they want to do, or, you know, get really excited, or, you know, any other combination of things. But this is the question that I see looming for, you know, this transition that we're all going through towards open science, which I think is huge and has been so successful. And hopefully the next step will be recognizing all the other kinds of work that are really necessary in this space.
What you brought up is very important, actually, right? So everyone has their own interests and they have their own talents, so they might not get the recognition that they deserve. Is that what you're saying, right?
I mean, I think that's true. It's not exactly what I'm saying, in so much as that it's not just interest-based. It's really like, to build an open science that works for everyone, we need to train people in these skills. But there isn't any incentive, if you're thinking from a career building perspective, to train people to be an open source maintainer, for example. I mean, there's some, but not as
Is
much.
it they're more likely to be in industry if they are that kind, rather than in academia?
I think that is the current career progression.
Mm. Yeah. So if it was in academia, like they develop themselves, do you think it would be like maybe universities have to think of new ways to incentivize them to work on these things? Like, for example, in Malaysia, they actually have different career pathways for researchers in academia, where they say one person could go into a researcher pathway, another could go into like teaching. So they can develop tools and innovations for purpose of teaching. So maybe those kind of things can be thought of to improve things that will otherwise get neglected, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think, as a panel, I'm hoping it sparks discussion.
Yeah.
Because I think that these questions about, like, how do we incentivize people to want to do this work
Yeah.
are critical for the work to get done in the long term. And right now, I think the incentive structure, which is much better than it was before, is that write a paper with the code and data openly available, which is huge. But it doesn't address, the core software libraries underlying the code. It doesn't address all the work that needs to get done to make the data available and curated, and
those things are not captured, right?
Exactly.
There's a lot of behind the scene work that need to be done.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think for getting started in open science, which this is all about, that is kind of the question about how, in my mind, that's the question when new trainees come to me now and ask, what can I do? That is sort of an open question mark for me, is like, where would you counsel people to spend time, knowing that these things are really critical, but it's hard to fit them in to an overall career.
True. Maybe we have to have a course. You get a certain amount of points just for doing this. Yeah. Okay. How about Shella? Do you have anything additional to say about that?
I guess just to add on to that, I mean, a lot of science really relies on volunteer effort, right? I mean, think about the whole peer review process. So there are lots of things that we put in work for, but aren't necessarily recognized for. And for most people in the US, at least, going up for tenure, part of your evaluation is on service. So maybe what we need are ways to better capture some of these different aspects of service, so that you have a way of describing your impact, even if it's not a traditional impact, not the, oh, I served on the open science organizational committee or whatever, but something different that people can still see that you're contributing to the community. But, I don't know that we've got a solution yet.
How about you, Ibrahima? Do you want to share about this? That there are so many aspects, right, that are not actually very obvious to everyone, but how do you deal with that?
Yeah. So I think the challenge is to see the benefit in the long run, because if you give to let's say postgraduate student, let's say he has 3 years and he needs to achieve a few things, so it's very challenging to let him understand that in the long run this will be beneficial for you. So this is probably the challenge. That means, how do you balance between what you need to achieve right now and what could be the benefit in the long run? So I think a lot of work needs to be done in that way, and starting with, let's say, from the making the student to understand what is the benefit in the long run, so that they could balance with what they need to achieve, for example, for their PhD.
Okay, so just to summarize everything, like how you got started in open science and how you would share insight with others who want to get started in open science, could you summarize it for us today?
So
just in a few words, like how would you share your insight with others who also want to get started in open science?
Yeah. So when I was mentioning earlier about the journal club that we had, so that was probably the starting point for me, because when you want to reproduce the work of someone, and that you realize that there are a few things that are missing. So it was to say, yes, if I want to publish and in a way that some other people will be able to reproduce it, I need to make sure that all the details will be there. And sometimes it's not involuntary, it's just we are not conscious about that. So that is probably the starting point. For the perspective, let's say in the long run, what I would say that I think we need something like we like this expression in Malaysia, this is top down, taking the research, let's say, from the university to somehow bring people to do open science. Otherwise, I think it will be very challenging to convince people to go ahead with it.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So we have some participants here with us today. Do anyone from the floor like to pose some question or even share your own insights? Please come to the front. Thank you.
Play devil's
Niels, our chair for OSIC
Yeah.
this year.
I'll play devil's advocate. I guess one thing that's come up in some of these discussions before is the financial incentives for maintaining software in the long term. If I think back to some Android games which are terrible, we'll persist in playing them, and the fact that they've got adverts means that people are still going to be involved in maintaining them and so on. So playing devil's advocate, should we have adverts on our open science software?
Thank you. I mean, okay, probably not adverts. I don't know what that would look like in the terminal. That would be a very specific thing. But to the point more broadly, I would assume about like, should it be kind of pay to play for some of this open science software? I see. Yeah. I'm still not sure how the adverts would work. We'd have to brainstorm that. I'm sure there's a company in there somewhere. But nonetheless, I mean, I do think that should people be contributing to the maintenance of open source software? I would say yes. I think that there should be ways for people to contribute. Right now, that's a relatively small number of funding agency calls, which are the mechanism for that, which is how taxpayers contribute and some philanthropies. But I think that more broadly, there is some recognition that these, Open Neuro, NIBABL, AFNI, like these core things in the ecosystem that support so much software, really, some of them don't have clear mechanisms for support themselves. And those that do not, having pathways wherein labs that use these to advance their own work could or should contribute, I think is something that would be valuable. The concern is, of course, if every lab gives $100, is that enough to pay for a maintainer? Probably not. But that doesn't mean that software isn't incredibly critical for those 20 labs. So how do you really tack on the true value that's being brought to the world as a whole? Yeah, I think that's hard right now.
Yeah,
Maybe adverts.
I understand. Like what you said, like if everything's open and free, then how do people get remunerated, right? To get actually incentivized to do it, right? So yeah, adverts might be a way, or getting to play a game, right? How about you, Shalva? What do you think?
I say go adverts.
Yeah,
Go fund me. I don't know.
yeah. Somebody has to make money to pay the people to maintain it, right? Right. So it's a very interesting thing, yeah. Evolving into open science, neuroimaging. We have to keep abreast with what is going on in other fields, right? Non-medical fields. Like how do they fund it, right? And which should join our crowdsourcing topic. We have one panel on that. Just to wrap it up, is there anything else you would like to say before we end today's panel discussion? Oh, you have more questions. That's wonderful. Yes, please.
I just wanted to raise the
Where are
point.
you from?
Oh, sorry, Blaise Frederick, McLean Hospital.
Okay.
I just wanted to raise the point that if you're looking to convince people why they should become involved in open science, I think you can't overlook the enlightened self-interest. When I do things, My most frequent collaborator is me in the future. So when I take all my data and I organize it in bids and I document it properly and I curate it and I make it ready to share, most of the time I'm sharing with me. And as I get older and I forget what I did, that becomes extremely useful. So if you point out to people that they get the benefit as well, that's important. The same goes with the open source software. If you compare the scripts that I use locally to do things with the stuff that I release as open source, the quality is much higher in the open source stuff. Because if I know the internet is looking over my shoulder, I'm a little more careful. I actually write tests, I write documentation, which I then read sometimes because I forget what I did. So you end up getting an awful lot of the benefits yourself. And I think a lot of people miss that. And I didn't know that when I started. I just kind of thought, well, I'll do this and see what happens. But I've gotten a lot of that. And I've also learned how to code a lot better because I've become aware of these tools that are out there and I start to use them, and it just made everything better. I'm much less likely to find a huge bug that I'm gonna have to retract a paper because I went to the problem of writing the software properly the first time. So.
Okay. Yes. Thanks for sharing. Yeah. So you learn, right? As we make it open, we also make sure that we are doing the steps correctly and it's reproducible. So yeah, definitely it's a learning curve for us as well. Yeah.
Yeah. Hello.
You are
my
from?
name is Song-Ho Lee from UNC Chapel Hill, and yeah, I had some experience on the contributing the open science
Okay.
when the COVID just outbreak.
Yeah.
So I couldn't go to the lab, so I built some software that
Wow.
I think it's useful for my research and kind of packaging it and decided, now maybe it's good to publish to the GitHub and
Right.
maybe
Amazing.
publish to the open source journal to the JAWS.
Yeah.
So and then actually I failed because
Oh, why?
it's because open source contributor reviewer has a different a level of expectation of the open source
Right.
package to be, which is I haven't never know because I'm
yeah.
just first
Right,
contributing. For example, how you're gonna make it sustainable, how you're gonna do make a kind of
Right.
organizing communication. So first impression is, I need to do a lot of research
On your
myself
own.
just for
Yes.
publishing
Right.
the one I already made. So
Correct.
I just wondering there is a kind of
For
some
beginners.
kind of for beginner best practice or something, some place to learn. So for example, even a GitHub how to use the GitHub
Right.
issue
Oh,
or
yeah.
push a pull
Okay.
a request. It was
Lot
kind of
and-
first
yeah,
time I
yes.
struggled to
So
learn
you
it.
need one is you want resources. Second, you can be the one who is the source of the
Yeah. So
right?
just wondering,
I will
kind of if
yes.
there was any movement. I want to
Correct.
contribute as possible,
Right.
but
They
just-
say
just-
necessity is the mother of creation.
yeah.
So if you find there is a gap that needs
Uh-huh.
to be filled, maybe you're the one to do it. Okay, Shala.
Well, I don't know of the resources. I hope they're out there. Do you know? I thought maybe you would.
I can speak to that. Yeah. I would say so. Yes, I would say that. I think the point Blaise Frederick brought up about yourself in the past, that is 100% true. I think for me, reading other open source code and reading things that have been put before, sometimes by me, but usually by other people, has been the best way to learn about how to structure things. I'll also say your experience of submitting to JOS and then being like, there are all these things I didn't know about. So when I first got involved in open source coding, because I'm self-taught in coding, I went to NeuroHackademy, which I don't know if you've heard of, but it's a really wonderful summer school run out of UW every summer. And I went and I was like, this is great. I'm going to learn things. And I left and I was like, oh my God, I need to learn things. It was but it was great because then I knew what I didn't know and I could spend the next several years trying to figure out, what is it that I need to learn to be able to do this effectively. And so I think that, exposure to other people who are already in this space is for me the biggest accelerator in everything I've done. So reading other open source code, looking at other published JOS submissions, because JOS is a really high bar. Seaborn, which is this instrumental Python library for visualization, is published there. Like all of these really, really beautiful things are published there because of this idea that it is so developer focused for folks who are really enmeshed in these practices. So there's a lot of good resources there. But yeah, personally, I would say Neurohackademy was huge. Brain Hack School out of Montreal, huge. It's actually expanded. It's not fair to say it out of Montreal anymore. When I participated, it was out of Montreal. But there are many, many different online educational courses that I have found really helpful, and fundamentally reading other open source code, looking at other open source packages. For me, that's kind of been the biggest accelerator for what I've done.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you. So it was really wonderful hearing the sharing from various experiences in open science. We had a great time learning about how you got started in open science. Thank you, Ibrahima Faye, Hyung Han Lee, Sheila Kilholtz, and Elizabeth Dupre. We had a great time with you. Nabila and myself would like to thank our in-person participants as well as our online participants. And if you are interested to take this topic further, we have a table talk later this morning. You can have a look at our schedule. It's only available for in-person attendees because it'll be easier to have a small group discussion on this. Thank you again. Have a good day. Bye.
Thank you so much. Bye bye.
Thank you so much. Bye bye.